Hey y'all, welcome to a best of edition of the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. These best of editions of the show feature amazing guests and episodes of the podcast you may have missed when they first aired. If you are new to the show, these are those can't miss episodes we really want you to listen to. Or maybe you're a long-time listener. We want to bring these episodes back around for you to enjoy again. Our goal is to bring you our best content every week so you have everything that you need to build a better future for your family. So wherever you are listening today, enjoy this week's best of edition of the Flip Lifestyle Podcast.
Welcome to the Flip Lifestyle Podcast, where life always comes before work. We're your hosts, Shane and Jocelyn Sams. We're a real family that figured out how to make our entire living online. And now we help other families do the same. Are you ready to flip your life? All right, let's get started. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Flip Lifestyle Podcast. Super excited to be back with you again today as Jocelyn and I continue our story about our entrepreneurial journey so that we can inspire you and show you what's possible and kind of what happened to us, this whirlwind ride that led to where we are today with the flipped lifestyle as compared to our old 9-to-5 jobs. In our last episode, we talked about how we got married, how we ended up finally getting married, and we got engaged. And it was a really, really like whirlwind process because I was coaching football. I just got a job at West Virginia as a graduate assistant, and Jocelyn was living in Lexington, Kentucky. So I was moving to Morgantown, and I basically called Jocelyn one day, and we had a nice logical discussion about if we should get married or not.
Of course we did.
Of course we did.
Because that's how I roll.
I like to tell Jocelyn I was on one knee on the other end of the phone. She just couldn't see it at the time.
Yeah, right.
It's totally not true. We were just sitting there having a good conversation. So we decided that it would be a good idea that we should get married on July 3rd. What year did we get married?
2004.
2004. Okay, that was a total man thing. Not even remembering the year. But I do remember the date. It was July 3rd. And because that was the only day we had free before we had to get back to work. So, most people have long engagements and, all this romantic and they plan all these things. And, we had like a month and a half, maybe 2 months. So we just immediately called all of our family and we're being like, hey, you got the 3rd free? Because we got to get married in like very, very fast. So.
And the bad thing was Shane's brother, Aaron, he was on a mission trip in Russia.
Yeah.
And we decided this, and he was going to be gone during this time, but like it's the only day that we had. So if we didn't get married on this particular day, it was going to be like another year before we had a chance to do it again. So Shane had to call Aaron. He was the first person to know. And he's like, look, man, I know you're going to Russia, but like we need to get this over with. Like,
he really just like talk about our marriage in the terms of we got to get this over with. I mean, I got to marry this guy. I don't know what's going on. I just got to get it over with.
That's pretty much about how romantic this story is. But so anyway, we really do love each other. We really do.
A lot.
But anyway, so he had to call Aaron and be like, hey, man, I know you can't come, but is that cool with you?
And he was like, oh, yeah, it's cool, man. I'm like, great. Okay. So I started calling everybody and Jocelyn started calling everybody. So I was, I've got a huge family. Like there's 5 of us total brothers and we all got, families and stuff. And so I'm calling everybody and trying to figure out, we don't even know where we're going to have it. We don't know what we're going to do. But I'm like, hey guys, we're getting married on the 3rd. Hey guys, we're getting married on the 3rd. And like everybody kept asking, they were like, why are you getting married so fast? And I'm like, well, we've been dating forever. And they were like, no, seriously. And I'm like, no, man. And we got to get married really quick because I got to be at work and blah, blah, blah.
And Shane says, it's a shotgun wedding.
I started telling everybody that it was a shotgun wedding. And for those of you who are not from the South, I don't know why I was saying this and I don't know why it just totally didn't register to me. But like a shotgun wedding is like when you accidentally get someone pregnant and you have to get married. And
for the record, it was not a shotgun wedding. It was not a shotgun
wedding. We did not have children for years after this. And but
Shane just thought it meant you got married really fast.
For some reason, I was just like, no, we're getting married fast. It's like a shotgun wedding. And it just totally didn't register to me that everyone thought that Jocelyn was knocked up. So
which was not true.
Which was not true. So I had to go back and tell everybody, oh, no, that's not what I meant. We're just getting married because, we got careers and we got jobs and we want to be together. And this was like the only time we had free. And
it was the date we had available in our calendar.
It was the date we had available in our calendar. So we didn't really want to have a big wedding. Neither one of us wanted to, have to plan anything. So we actually got married out in Land Between the Lakes at a place called Patty's Settlement. which is this. It's like mine and Jocelyn's favorite restaurant in the world. It's
if you ever have an opportunity, if you're in Western Kentucky,
it's really,
pork chops
really
good.
Like an inch thick, and they're just there's 2
flour
inches
pot, homemade bread, and strawberry butter. It's really good.
Yeah. So we were like, hey, the practical people that we are, we're like, hey, if we're gonna get married somewhere, let's get married where we can eat really good food afterwards. So we got married in the gazebo at Patty's Settlement, which was beautiful. We had a really small ceremony. My dad actually was the person who married us, and I was horrifically nervous that day that we got married because everything was happening so fast, and I was just having the jitters, and everything just like got thrown together so quickly. I was just totally nervous. So we were doing our vows, and basically my dad said, okay, now Shane, all right, get the ring and say, with this ring I thee wed. And I was so nervous. I said, with this wing I thee read, and it's totally on tape and it's totally filmed. And I'm like, great, this is how.
And it's actually on tape because it was still VHS.
On tape. Yeah, we got a VHS tape of this whole ceremony. It's pretty awesome. But so I was totally nervous, and that was the first time I realized that you could totally screw something up and it would be okay. Like your target audience would get over it, right? Because she just laughed and had a good time with it. It's kind of like when you have the wrong subject line on one of your emails and you say something that you shouldn't have said, and then you send it out and you're like, crap, I just sent that to thousands of people, and you got to kind of like go back and say it again. So I did that. I got it right. I corrected myself. And man, our wedding was just hilarious. It was so funny. Like Jocelyn had hired this harp person. Oh my gosh.
Who I had specifically asked not to sing. She
just wanted harp music during our ceremony. So we were like, why were we holding hands? Like, was it the candle lighting ceremony? Or
I guess. I don't know.
I don't remember. I remember that we did something, and then we walked back and we held hands, and this beautiful harp music was playing. And then all of a sudden this woman's like, whoa, that's a beautiful thing. And that's exactly what it sounded like. It sounded like a dead cat being bludgeoned to death by a bagpipe. I mean, that's pretty much how bad this woman was singing. And I remember looking at Jocelyn, and for everybody who listens to the program, you know that Jocelyn is like, things don't go wrong. Like, that's not how her life works. Like, everybody follows the plan. Everybody's on the plan. And
I had a detailed written plan
that said, don't sing on it, basically. And I was like, and you know me, I'm like, I need to take action. I need to make this right. Jocelyn was looking over my shoulder at this woman, and I was looking at her, and I could hear her singing behind me. Our parents and everyone in the crowd were squirming, and like there's this awesome clip on our wedding video of Jocelyn's mom. As soon as the first word comes out of the lady's mouth, her eyes just roll back in her head like, someone had like stun gunned her, basically. And I looked at Jocelyn and I whispered, I said, do you want me to say something to her? Like, I was about to stop the wedding and be like, yo, lady, quit singing.
No, we just let her finish.
Jocelyn just like, no, just keep going. Oh, I'm so furious right now. I'm so mad.
Yeah, I was not happy at all. So I ended up writing her a letter later because people still did that at this time. And I was like,
you still do that now. You still write letters to people.
Sometimes, yeah. But I was just like, hey, you weren't supposed to sing and you pretty much ruined my wedding.
Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, our wedding wasn't ruined.
It wasn't ruined. It was fine. Yeah. Like, looking back at it now, it's kind of funny, but at the time it was not funny. Oh, it was not funny
at the time. That's the angriest I think I've ever seen you in my life. And so basically, all this chaos happened, but it was a beautiful day. The wedding was awesome. Got a ton of great pictures. Ate a ridiculous amount of food afterwards. And then we basically got in the car and drove to West Virginia. We had this little apartment. It's so funny, like when I think back about like where we are now.
It was a studio.
It was a studio apartment. So I had already been there for a month or two. We went to the studio apartment that was basically as big as a bedroom. I mean, let's be honest. It was a bedroom plus a kitchen.
It was about as big as the room we're in right now.
Yeah, which
like the whole apartment.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And all I had was an old twin bed that I was using to sleep on. So me and Jocelyn like couldn't even fit in the same bed. So we blew up an air mattress for our first couple of months of our life together. We slept on an air mattress in the floor of an old college studio apartment. And that's how we basically started off our relationship.
All right. So we had to get out of the studio apartment. So our next mission was finding a place to live. So we looked at a lot of different options. We looked at renting something. We looked at buying something, and we ended up landing on buying a townhome. So we found a townhome. It was on a golf course in the Cheat Lake area, if any of you guys know anything about West Virginia. And we started moving in. We got everything situated. And that was the point where we kind of started going our separate ways. I was still working for my corporate job. and Shane was working in college football, so he would leave super early in the morning,
like 6:45, just to get to the stadium for our first staff meeting, a.m. every day.
and get home. 10,
11,
probably bedtime.
Like every minute I was there was dark when I left and dark when I got home. 100%.
Basically, I was still traveling a lot. Shane was gone all the time. We just bought this house and we pretty much never saw it.
Or each other. I always tell Jocelyn, I look back now, and I was in that house so infrequently that I cannot to this day remember what the upstairs looked like. Like I can remember walking in and seeing like our living room and the laundry room and the kitchen, but I didn't eat there. I ate breakfast and dinner and lunch at the building. I took showers at the football stadium, and I don't even remember what the upstairs left. And then Jocelyn would have to drive back down to the corporate headquarters every once in a while.
Or I had to drive to Pittsburgh. I had to drive up to the airport in Pittsburgh and fly somewhere. And we pretty much just didn't see each other. Like there was kind of a joke at my office. People would be like, "Hey, how's married life?" And I'm like, "It's great because we never see each other. We don't have an opportunity
I don't know what
to
it's
fight.
Like yet. We haven't got to hang out any." So
and we really didn't.
Yeah.
I don't even remember really having friends or doing anything on the weekends or anything.
We couldn't do anything on the weekends because we were at football games. Our first 6 months was basically a cycle of Sunday afternoons we had off. Sunday was about the only time I had a little bit of time because we had like a staff meeting and then we had like a little lull. But I would still have to go in early, and you were gone like almost every third weekend probably. You had to go to a trade show or something. So basically we did not get to see each other for the first little bit.
And during that time, a lot of different things started happening. So we realized, okay, first of all, we're never seeing each other. Later that year, so this was in January, or actually in December, we were at the Gator Bowl in December of 2004, and we had just left. We were driving home from the airport, and my mom called me and was like, "Your Nana, my grandma, has cancer. She has lung cancer." And I'll never forget that, just driving home and just like crying the entire way home because I was just so upset. So anyway, she had surgery in January of 2005, and the surgery didn't go well. They had to remove part of her lung, and she never went home. So she died on February 2nd, and she was like 63 years old. So this was like the first experience with death of someone who was like super close to me. And I think that at that point, we just kind of realized, okay,
life is short.
This is not the life that we want. Never seeing each other and just never seeing our family. Like this isn't the life that we want.
Yeah. When we wanted to start a family, we wanted to have kids, and we didn't even have time to make kids. We weren't together enough to make any kids. All these things started happening. And it also, when Jocelyn's grandmother died, it made me kind of look at our relationship differently. And I started looking back. There was a moment in college where basically we almost died. We were coming out of church one Sunday, and we were going to meet some friends at a Fazoli's in Lexington, Kentucky. I'll never forget this. And we took a wrong turn, and I had to get back and come back out on a major highway in Lexington, Kentucky called Man of War Boulevard. And we pulled out. We were driving along, and basically a guy that was totally drunk at like 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, he blew like a .2 something on the police report. He hit us and nearly killed us, hit us from behind going about 80 miles an hour. And we were doing about 20. So like he just destroyed us, threw us across 2 lanes of traffic. We hit a big metal light pole. It fell down and crushed the car right in between us. I can remember when we were going across the wrong lane of traffic, reaching over, and like my hand was on Jocelyn. I remember looking at her, and there was a car coming right at us. And I can remember distinctly thinking at that moment, Jocelyn's dead. I'm about to never see her again. And by the grace of God, we came on through, we crashed. We ended up like sideways up on a hill. And I remember, this is kind of funny, but it's not. And then Jocelyn, I remember looking over Jocelyn when we crashed, and I was like, "Oh my God, we're alive." We were hurt so bad that I said, "Jocelyn, get out of the car." I thought it was going to catch on fire. And Jocelyn looked back at me, because Jocelyn never misses any details in life. You got to realize this, people. And she goes, "Put the car in park."
Of all things to say.
Of all things to say. But I remember we got out and we both just like collapsed, and they put us in ambulances. And when I was young, I didn't recognize how the gravity of that situation. Like I almost lost her. She could have lost me. And then when we experienced this death, it just brought all that back together, all those thoughts like, man, like we could not be here tomorrow. And wouldn't it suck if we were gone tomorrow and we didn't see each other the day before because we were working? So we decided that college football and the corporate lifestyle basically were, climbing that ladder of success through these big organizations over 20 years was not what we wanted. So we had to start looking for kind of alternatives. So the first thing we did was I took a job at a much smaller school at Eastern Kentucky University.
Which is closer to both of our families.
Closer to both families. We thought, hey, we're closer to family. We can see more people. My brother lived in Richmond, Kentucky at the time with his wife. So it was really cool. We were going to be able to see them a little bit and kind of just get into a position where we could think about our future more, because at that level, you didn't have quite as much work. I mean, it was still, 8 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m. every day, but it wasn't quite as intense as the national stage. So we got there, and what we decided was that we would go into education, like high school. I would coach high school football, which was a lot less time intensive. You still get to school early at 7 a.m. and be done with practice about 6 o'clock, but at least we had the evenings, at least we had the weekends, and we could get a little bit more time balance in our life. And that was the first time I think we realized that we really wanted time freedom more than we wanted money or glory or fame or, climbing the corporate ladder.
So while life was a little bit better at Eastern Kentucky, it still wasn't really what we wanted. We knew we just wanted something different. Shane was working still at a college program. I was still working a corporate job, and we just weren't very happy. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't with each other. It's just we weren't really happy with our life circumstance. So Shane started looking at maybe trying to do a high school job, a high school football coach. He already had that degree. He was a certified teacher. So he was just like, okay, well, I'll try to find a high school job, because at least that way I'll be able to manage my own schedule. So I was like, okay, that sounds good. And at that time, I was kind of like, I don't really know that I want to stay in this corporate job either, but I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah. And we had to pay bills, so you had to keep your job. So.
He found a job over in my hometown, actually, in Western Kentucky, and that just happened to be where the job was. We weren't really trying to get there necessarily. It's just the way it worked out.
And I had applied for like 13 other schools. Like I went on so many interviews, and I can't tell you how many times that they would call me and ask me to be an assistant coach. Or like I was the second guy for the job. It was just because I didn't have any experience. And the bad thing about the school in Jocelyn's hometown was they were literally the worst program in Kentucky. They hadn't won a game ever. Now, I'm not kidding. The program was new to the varsity stage, and they had never, ever won a football game. They'd only really played JV for a couple years, and then they tried some varsity stuff. And so we were kind of like, you can only go up, right?
So Shane started this job. Again, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew that I could be a substitute teacher. So I thought, well, I'll try this and just see if it works out. It's better than working in corporate, even though I won't make hardly any money. At least I'll be around.
You had a lot of turnover at your job. You were really unhappy because all the original people you loved had left.
Yeah,
basically.
all of the people in the sales department, most of them had moved on to other positions in other companies. We were owned by another company, so a lot of them had gone to positions in different companies that the corporation owned. I was actually considered at one time for a national position. It would have been headquartered in Tampa. I actually interviewed for that during all this. I think it's when we lived in Richmond is when
it was. And we had just decided that I would try to find something to coach down there if you got that job, because it was really good and it paid well.
Yeah. So I was actually number 2 for that position. Another person got it with more experience than me. But I think I was like 25 years old, and I was being considered for, it was like the director of marketing for the entire corporation.
Yeah. And you had some people in, like the people you had worked for were in other places, and you kind of thought, man, maybe that one of them could give me a job. I could work remotely or something like that. But
and living in Tampa, at age 25, it wouldn't have been the worst thing.
No, that would have been pretty good, I think. Yeah.
But I got a call not too long after that. So I had interviewed at a trade show. We were at like this big national trade show, and I interviewed and a couple other people interviewed, and I got a call a couple weeks later, and they were like, hey, we think you're great, but we chose this other person. She just has more experience. And, that was totally fair. Like, I wasn't upset in any way. But it kind of made me think, like, okay, should I stay in this? Like, the people in the parent corporation, they like me, so maybe I should stick around.
Yeah. But I think in the end, what we kind of eventually looked at that moment was like a sign, like everything, all the pieces were kind of falling in place for us to move to Jocelyn's hometown to do this coaching stuff and things like that. So I got that job. Jocelyn got turned down for that position, and it was kind of like, everything seemed to be pointing that way. I think you quit as soon as we moved back and started applying for sub jobs and like aid jobs in the schools. Didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And people in the corporation, they did not understand at all. I mean, it's just like when we quit our jobs, when we started our online business, like people didn't get it. Why are you quitting? Why are you leaving to be a substitute teacher? That doesn't make sense. But to us, it did make sense because
what we valued, our values were different than theirs.
The kind of life that we were living in corporate, that wasn't the kind of life that we wanted to live.
Yeah. So basically our plan was, so I got my teaching job. I got to coach this football program.
And I started substituting, just trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Because at that point, I really didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Before it was always just get a job to pay the bills. I think that's what, like when you come out of college, you're like, I just want to make money. I don't care what happens. Then you realize, oh my gosh, I sold my soul for this.
And also,
I have no time.
I think that you realize that your life, like your happiness is largely dependent on what you choose as a job.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So like basically Jocelyn and I decided, okay, let's do education, but let's get on the same schedule. We wanted to be off at the same time. We wanted to be able to travel at the same time. We wanted to, get home about the same time, give or take. And Jocelyn was going to be involved in the football program, like helping me build this thing. And so she started subbing.
Like in everything else, Shane was, he was the person who headed up the charge of a lot of, what would you call it? Like
building this new life we had drawn on paper, basically. Like,
well, I'm talking about even the football program. Like,
oh gosh, I had to take over this whole football program from the ground up. I had to start a youth program. I had to help coach the middle school team, and like I made so many people mad. People tried to fight me in a restaurant one time because I wouldn't let these guys coach youth football because they were like evil to the children. And they didn't know what they were doing. It was just madness to get this program off the ground.
He was like knocking stuff over, and I was like cleaning up behind. Typically that's the way it works.
Usually, right?
So, I was really involved in the football program. And as I started working in school, I realized, okay, this isn't terrible. Like, I like the people that I work with. Working with the kids, that's okay. I like a lot of different things about the school system, so maybe I should start trying to find a way to work here full time as a certified person.
Our goal was to be a teacher, but Jocelyn, I don't think, is really like the teacher mold as much as she is. She's more of a central figure kind of person.
And one thing I realized by working in classrooms is that I didn't want my own classroom.
Right. She wanted to kind of be like the hub. So I was like, hey, what if you were a librarian? Because at Western Kentucky University, which was near where we were, they actually had a certified librarian program that you could do online. This was like when online education was really starting to take off. Today, it's a huge thing, but back then it was like you couldn't get a whole degree online everywhere, but you could get an entire degree pretty much online. I think you had to go there a couple times for tests or something, but I was like, hey, you could be a librarian. And if you like, what if I was the football coach in a school and you were the librarian in the school? We would be central. Everything in the school would revolve around us because we would touch so many people. We would change a lot of lives. And librarians made more money than teachers did because they worked more days. So they got a few more extra days in their contract.
And it made a lot of sense for me. I've always had a just love of reading my entire life.
And technology. I let her work with technology.
Yeah, it also had a big technology initiative. And I'm like, hey, this sounds like it might be a good fit for me. So I started looking into the program.
Yeah, so Jocelyn.
And I'll tell you that people told me, oh, you'll never get a librarian job. They're really hard to get.
So negative. They were so negative about that line of work.
The people at my school told me that because my principal at the time, he really wanted me to stay there. He didn't want me to get a certified position because, that my school already had a librarian. So he knew that he couldn't keep me if I became a librarian.
It's the first time we realized not to listen to what the world says and that whatever you decide to do is what will happen in your life. I mean, I just decided I wanted to be a football coach. And within a 3-year period, I went from being a college graduate assistant at a top 10 program to another college. I got another job. Like I got 2 jobs back to back. Some people try 10 years and can't get into a college, and I got 2. And then I went and got a head coaching job, and I didn't even play in college football. I got a head coaching job, and Jocelyn just decided, no, I'm going to be a librarian. We didn't listen to all the haters and all the naysayers, and we didn't let other people dictate what was possible in our lives. she decided she was going to be a librarian and she would get a job like very quickly. So, that's kind of a lesson learned there, that don't listen to anybody. What do you want to do? And just, it's all up to you if you get it or not. And I think that's, what you're talking about here is people doubted you and you said, no, I'm going to do this because it sounds cool. Yeah.
And so during that time, a lot of things happened. So we lived there, I think, 3 years. And during that time, so I was working on my master's degree while working at school. I was also pregnant starting in 2008. I was pregnant with Isaac. And during that time, after that school year, Isaac was born in November of 2008. That following spring, the high schools decided to consolidate for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, there were 2 high schools in the county, and they decided they were going to consolidate into one school. Well, here's the problem. If you have 2 football teams and the schools combine, how many football teams do you have left? You have 1. We did manage to win a couple games while we were there, but we were not great by any means. The other school was better than us, and the coach at that school grew up in that county. He was the head coach in that county, and it was very clear from day one. They gave me like a token interview, but it was very clear that the hometown boy was getting the job. And they kind of sort of were like, do you want to stay on and be an assistant? There was a really big political problem because they weren't going to fire anyone when the schools consolidated, but everyone saw the writing on the wall, and there were going to be massive layoffs in year 2 because you just didn't need all those teachers once the schools consolidated. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I told Jocelyn. Jocelyn was finishing her master's degree. She was ready to go look for jobs as a librarian the next year. And I said, let's try to find some jobs. So I actually secured a job in the next county over as a defensive coordinator. And I got them to get Jocelyn a librarian job. But at the exact same time, about a week or 2 after that, a job came open right near my hometown. I met this guy at a weightlifting meet. We had kind of heard of each other. We talked. He was taking over a program for the first time. His first choice for defensive coordinator, a buddy of his, didn't take the job or took it and went back to his school. And I told Jocelyn, I'll never forget this. I was standing out at the deck at our house, and I was looking out at the woods, and I was talking to him on the cell phone. Jocelyn was inside. This was like the first time I ran into the kitchen and told you something crazy. But like, I was on the deck, she was inside, and he was like, hey man, do you want to do this? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it, man. And I accepted the job on the deck, and I just ran inside and I said, we're moving over there. And she goes, okay. And this was, let's go.
So
I had to call that other guy and tell him
we had
quit.
to call the next county over, and we were like, listen, I know that we just accepted these jobs and that you guys approved us at the last board meeting, but we're not coming.
Yeah, and they got really mad. Oh my gosh, they were so mad at us. But you know what? It's our life, and you have to do what's best for your life. You can't worry about what everybody else thinks.
And sometimes you've got to do things that are really hard. Yeah. And calling that school district was not tough. Easy.
We pulled so many strings in that job.
And we didn't want to do that. But like sometimes making the right choice involves
breaking a few eggs to get
some
an omelet.
Some hard choices, not bad choices, but hard choices. All right, so we moved to West Virginia. We moved to an apartment in West Virginia. We moved to a house in West Virginia. We moved to Richmond.
We had 2 apartments there because the first one we bought had bugs. And
so we didn't move in.
So we immediately moved out and moved into a new place.
So that was the 5th move, and then we moved
to my hometown
here.
Into one
house.
house.
This is already 6 moves.
And then we bought another house later on. By the time we get in there, really, we're 7 moves in like.
And we've been married
5 years?
4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So our son's born. We moved back to my hometown. We go into this program, and things are good for a while. We were blessed to turn that program. This was another bad program. They'd only won like 3 games in 3 years. But we immediately out of the gate got to 500. We had an amazing streak of winning seasons, started crushing our rival. It was just a really good football experience. We had an amazing time. I love the head coach. I love all the coaches there. That part of that job was a good experience. But the school system we were in was very, very utilitarian. Is that right? Is that the right word? Like corporate, like almost militant in the way it was administered. And we had come from a place where everybody kind of knew each other, and there were a lot of great, good, solid people. Loved my principal at the old school before they consolidated. And this place was a lot different. It was very businesslike, very structured, and you were very much a cog in the machine. I mean, it was, I hate to say it, but it was a very like slave mentality. Like they owned you, and they would hold things over your head. So the work environment that we found ourselves in from an administrative point wasn't the best. It was very corporate. Jocelyn had a really good school. I'd say her school was a little bit better than mine, and that the high school I was at. So we went about 3 years at the school, had a pretty good football experience, But the more we were there, the more things just got bad. It was like that miserable 9-to-5 experience where you go to work, you don't feel valued, you're just a cog in the machine. And the longer we were there, the worse and worse that got.
Not only do we have this experience, I mean, my school was really good as far as people, but Shane was having this negative experience with the people that he worked with. I didn't like it because we had to drive a long way. Like from our house, it was at least a 20-minute drive for both of us, and that's not including taking the kids to daycare. So we sort of skipped ahead a little bit in this scenario. We also had another baby in this time. We had an infant and a toddler that we were having to drop off at daycare every day.
And like, I remember Jocelyn's mom kept Isaac when he was first born, and we had to get a daycare center. And I will never forget when we dropped the kids off at daycare for the first time. I remember Jocelyn just started crying. Like, it was awful. Like, we went to the daycare center. The sun hadn't come up yet. It was so early when we were dropping the kids off. So it was dark. And the lady at the time that ran the place, we knew was a good lady. And we trusted her, but she took the baby inside, and I remember hugging Jocelyn, and she just stood there and cried for a minute. That was just awful. And that was one of the first times we really started saying, man, maybe even working for other people is a bad idea, because we have to put our kids in a daycare center.
But at the time, just like a lot of people listening to this podcast, we didn't know what else to do. I mean, starting a business didn't even occur to us at this time. Like, we were just thinking, okay, this is what we have to do. This is our lot in life. This is what we do.
Yeah. So we had these long commutes, and they started wearing on us. And I know some people have a lot longer commute than 25, 30 minutes.
But around here, like, that's a long way.
A really long commute. And also both of us were going in separate directions. We weren't anywhere near each other or near our children at the time.
And one thing I didn't like about it, too, is that in the first football job that you had, I lived right down the street and also didn't have any kids. So, like, I was able to be involved with the team a lot, which meant that we saw each other a lot. At this school, I had to come back after school was over and get the kids, which meant that I didn't want to drive all the way from this town back to where we lived and then drive back to go to practice because I had an infant and a toddler. Like, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So
we were right back in the same boat of not seeing each other, basically.
I was not involved in the football program at all. Like, I didn't know any of the players' names or anything like that. And at the other school, like, I feel like they were my kids, or at least my little brothers or something, like, I just knew them really well. And I just felt like we were going in separate directions again. So instead of going back in the same direction, like what we had intended, we ended up like separating ourselves again.
Yeah. Literally, we drove opposite directions. So we ended up about an hour apart every day because Jocelyn was driving one way and I was driving the other. And also, I wasn't the head coach, so I had no control over what was going on. I had to be at practice when I was told to be at practice. I had to do whatever we did. A lot of people in the school were really negative. I know a lot of you go to work and you're like, why does this person next to me always have to complain? Like, it got to the point where people would complain so much about everything in the school being so negative. Like, I would only go in the halls when I was forced to do hall duty and stuff. I wouldn't eat lunch with anybody. I would stay in my room and just like be miserable. But at least I was alone in my misery, and I didn't have to have misery being compounded on me by all these negative coworkers that were complaining about their life and about the administration and about how things suck. This goes on for 2 or 3 years, and I started getting really, really frustrated with almost everything but football. I still loved football, and I loved coaching after the thing. But other than that, I was just getting unhappier and unhappier as the years went on. So basically what happened then was probably the moment that changed our life and changed our direction and really hammered home that we had no control over our lives, living the way the world told us to live with the 9-to-5 lifestyle, the job, all that. Isaac started changing in his behavior.
So this was in like March of 2012.
Yeah. He really started having a really hard time. He was withdrawing from us. He was putting his fist in his mouth, like, and chewing on his hand, like crying sometimes for no reason. Like, we didn't understand what was going on. And he became deathly afraid of bathrooms, especially bathrooms when like the lights were out. And so we kind of like just assumed that like it was a kid and he was, having potty training problems and he was scared of the dark and we didn't really know what was going on.
And we should say, too, that the daycare had changed ownership during this time.
Yes.
So the lady who was watching them to begin with, she retired and she sold it to someone else.
Who brought in a bunch of new people. And
we didn't know at the time, like, we didn't know anything about these people. Like, we just decided we'll give them a try, see how it works out.
Right. So a series of events happened. I started asking Isaac. He can't really talk a lot right now. He can't verbalize what's going on or what he's scared at. I mean, he was only like 3 years old. So it was hard to communicate with him, but he kept getting more and more scared to go to the daycare center. I dropped Isaac off every day on my way to work, and he just freaked out. He started freaking out about going inside. But then again, we thought, is this separation anxiety? Is this just a kid? What is going on? And it got worse and worse and worse about him going to the daycare. And one day I walked in after school and kind of glanced around, didn't say anything to anybody when I walked in. They were in the back room with all the kids, and there was one kid sitting in the front, like in the corner. And I'm like, okay, that kid might have gotten in trouble or something. He's being punished. And I knew who he was. I can't remember what his name was, but I said, hey, where's Isaac at? I said, in the bathroom. I said, in the bathroom? Is anybody with him? And he said, nope. He's been in there a long, long, long time. Like, I'll never forget the kid saying this. So I go and open the bathroom door, and Isaac was sitting in there in the dark in the bathroom. And it just hit me like, what's going on in here? So at this point, I knew something was weird, and I went and asked the worker. I was like, why is he doing that? And they're like, oh, he's not been in there that long. And, we just did this so he would use the bathroom faster. And I'm like, okay, that's ridiculous. But like, it's so weird to look back and say, man, I should have took him out right then and there. But at first I was like, okay, that's just poor judgment. Maybe don't do that. Why would you do that? And it started clicking to me. This might be why he's scared of the bathroom. Well, a little while later, Jocelyn was driving around town, totally unprompted. And Isaac, out of nowhere, and this is a 3-year-old kid saying this, said, she wipes poop on my nose. And Jocelyn said, what?
And this is my 3-year-old child. I mean, who
unprompted.
Has no reason to be saying this at all.
And Jocelyn was like, who did? And he was like,
he called the person's name.
Yeah. So apparently they had been trying to like stop them from potty training. So like we would later find out like they were doing crazy things. They were locking kids in the bathroom. They were, rubbing poop on kids' nose like you would a dog. Or we heard that one kid, they put him in a diaper. He was an older kid, and stood him up on a table and kids made fun of him. And, this
and you
was
may
later
be
when we found
wondering,
this out.
like, why didn't you do something about this? We did. Social services got involved.
Yes.
So there were a lot of other things
These
to
are
go
all
along with
2020
this.
hindsight things that we're talking about here. So what happened was I was taking Isaac to the daycare. There were 2 buildings, and I went to the daycare, and after the poop comment, I was just furious. And I went in that morning, and Isaac really flipped out, and I kind of confronted them. And I told him something was wrong, and I confronted the owner. And I was just so lost at that moment. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave Isaac with these people. He wouldn't stay because I didn't want to leave with them because I knew something was going on. So there was one lady in the other building who took care of bed babies, and she was from the old regime, the old people that do it. And I trusted her, and I was so mad. And those of you who know me good, I can get furious. Like I can go off pretty bad. So I kept my cool a little bit, and I went over to the other building to get Isaac away from these people. And because we had nowhere else to go, we had to go to work. I mean, we're just like everybody else. We had to go make our living. We couldn't just skip work whenever we wanted to. But this was happening at 7 a.m. Everything was in chaos. I went and gave Isaac to her because I trusted her. And I said, do not let him out of your sight. He does not leave this room. I'm going to run to work real quick and tell them that I've discovered this thing and I'm coming back to deal with this. So, I got in my car and I drove to work. And I thought that decent human beings would understand that I just discovered that my son was being mistreated horribly at a daycare and I needed to go deal with it. But I tried to do what a good worker was supposed to do, what the world said. You go to work, you put work first, you put your job, in line with everything else. It's a priority in your life because that's how you feed your family, right? So I went to school, went to my classroom, got all my kids checked in, went next door to the teacher that was next door to me. And I said, hey, could you watch my class for a minute? I've had an emergency and I got to go talk to the principal to see what I can go.
And one thing that you have to remember is that we did not miss work. I mean, unless someone was like deathly ill, we were there every single day. Shane hardly ever missed. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 days a year.
Ever. Because.
And that's what made this even worse, I think, because we were the model employee.
We were perfect employees. I mean, we worked hard. We sacrificed for the school. We sacrificed for the kids in our school. And, it was bad. But anyway, so I went downstairs to see my principal. I didn't get to talk to the main principal. There was an interim assistant principal at the time, and she was in her office, and I knocked on the door, and she kind of looked up at me like, what do you want? So I explained to her the situation, that I just found this out, and I just literally put the last piece of the puzzle together that morning, and that I was literally going back to confront them and to get law enforcement and call social services and do all these things. And she listened and she was quiet. And And I was like, I have to go. Can you watch my class or can you call in a sub? And normally you have to call a sub in like before a certain time before they can get one for you. It was kind of an odd scenario going on, but this was ridiculous. I mean, I had to go deal with this. And I'll never forget her like looking up at me with this really like just stoic, monotone, I'm in charge, kind of attitude. And she said, no, Mr. Sams, I can't do that. I don't have time to go watch your class. I'm not able to get a sub at this time during the day. You need to go back to your classroom and you can handle this after work. I know that your son needs you right now, but your kids in your classroom need you too, and I need you too. So go back to your classroom and you can deal with it later. And it like tears me up. I'm like actually crying right now thinking about it. I had to like stop the recording there for a second, but I just remembered at that moment, like realizing how little this place valued us, how little they cared, and like how this environment was just toxic, and it was not the way that life was supposed to be. This wasn't like how things were going to go. And it's really hard because like our son still to this day has problems from that incident, like 5 years later. And it's just really tough to think back on it. But, I'm kind of glad that she said that, because when she said that to me, I realized that I was not going to be in this situation for much longer. I was done. Like we were going to find a way somehow to gain control of our lives, because here was this person who was my employer who thought they had so much control over my life just because they gave me a paycheck every 2 weeks and insurance, that they could dictate when I could be there for my child and when I couldn't be. That righteous fury just lit in my heart. And at that moment, I said, no, I'm dealing with this. You can fire me. You can do whatever. And they actually did reprimand me. Like I got called into the principal's office later for going and taking care of this issue. When I did, I actually got a thing in my file that was like, we're going to reprimand you. And my principal actually said to me, I'm not going to fire you this time. Like that actually happened. He said that to me later on. I'm not going to fire you this time. Well, this time from like not going and helping my kid? Like, what do you mean this time? So if my kid gets in a car wreck or something, I can't go. I got to wait until the end of the school day. It was just a terrible situation. But the good thing about this situation that came out of it was we realized at that moment that we had given up our lives. We had basically sold ourselves into slavery, and we were going to get out of it. And I started doing everything in my power. I kept telling Jocelyn over and over, I'm going to find some way for us to make a living. Other people have their own jobs. Other people make a living. Other people eat and keep a roof over their head. There's got to be a way that we can make enough money to pay our bills without relying on someone else and without trading our life for a few dollars. So that's what we did. We started having conversations about what we could do. Jocelyn had, what were you doing? Like, you got a sewing machine or something?
Yeah, I had bought a sewing machine. Like I was going to try to sew curtains, which I wasn't very good at.
Like she was going to make them. We were going to sell them on eBay, like, and stuff like that. And then maybe even fix clothes. And like we looked at a building one time for like a consignment store, because Jocelyn loved to buy some consignment clothes now, y'all. She loved consignment shops. So she was like, hey, why don't I open my own consignment shop? Maybe we can make a living like that. One day we were driving in the car and I started saying this saying, and I just got it in my mind relentlessly. And I said, I wonder if we could get 100 people to give us $50. And Jocelyn was like, what?
He's like, that's all we got to do. Like to replace our income. Cause that's about how much we brought home from teaching. It was like, about $5,000 a month.
Yes. I said, it's really simple. When you do the math, it's 100 people giving us $50. And if we can make 100 people do that every month, then that's $60,000 a year. And Jocelyn like looked over at me and said, but how are you going to do that? And that's when it all started to change. And I started looking in different paths, different alternatives. I'm like, how can I get 100 people to give me $50? There's 7 billion people on the planet Earth. Surely I can convince 100 of them every month to give me $50. And maybe I can't do it here. Maybe I can do it elsewhere. So I started looking for alternative ways to make money than your traditional, physically do something kind of job or work for someone else's job. And that led me to iTunes one day to find something about internet business or online business or something about business. And I discovered a podcast by a guy named Pat Flynn, and he taught me how to get 100 people to give us $50. So next time on our next show, I'm going to tell you all about how we discovered online business. We're going to get into the details about how we started everything, how it all came to be, how we made our first money online. and really the moment that led to us living the flipped lifestyle today. I hope you guys are enjoying this little series that we've got going here, really fleshing out our story and telling everything, how we got to here. I hope that you are getting something out of this and you realize that you can do this too, and that we are trying to inspire you, trying to help you to figure out how you can change your life and flip your life as well. So thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week to continue our story. We will also be continuing helping other people in our community. And we hope that you're getting as much out of this as we are going back and telling it. So thanks for listening. We will see you next time right here on the Flip Lifestyle Podcast.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this best of edition of the Flipped Lifestyle Podcast. We would love to help you take your next steps toward your goals. We have a free online business quick start course over at our website at flippedlifestyle.com. This course will help you set big goals and make them happen, find and validate your ideas today, and help you identify and find your perfect customers. Our online business quick start guide is a free resource, and you can get it right now over at flippedlifestyle.com. That's FLIPPED lifestyle.com. Head there right now and download your free resource today.